Story 1. If you work a full-time job, which most of us have to do to survive, you spend more time with your coworkers than with your own family. Story 2. Driving on a freeway. Thousands of people driving in vehicles at speeds that can cause almost instant death in a bad collision. We are all doing it sleep-deprived, on medications and often impaired, all with very little training and oversight, while being mere feet from each other. Story 3. Asking 17-year-olds to decide the rest of their lives and then function as adults by being responsible for everything, but also having a curfew. Edit. I have to admit I thought this said university thing, but I am glad it still applies. Story 4. Suicide. Billions of years of evolution have developed multiple mechanisms and instincts to prevent us from dying, yet people still choose to end their lives. Suicide rates should be seen as a clear indicator that something is wrong in our country, culture, systems, medication, education, and more. However, they are often treated as an individual issue. The worst part is that governments, religions, cultures, and other systems of control treat suicide as a crime, a sin, or a personal failing when, while mental illness is absolutely relevant, these same systems are often part of the problem. Suicide rates can vary greatly by state, country, religion, culture, and laws. Therefore, it cannot all be attributed solely to mental illness. Story 5. Kicking children out when they turn 18. Our children lived with us until they were personally ready and employed in jobs that could support them at 21 and 22. They made the decision to move out and both know they are welcome back anytime they want or need. Story 6. Anything related to music, Bluetooth makes no sense. Microphones translate vibrations to accurately mimic the sounds made nearby. I don't even want to start on how vinyl records use a needle and grooves to produce entire songs. Story 7. Spending thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars on a wedding is not advisable. You should avoid going into debt for one day that is ultimately performative, referring to the reception rather than the ceremony. Story 8. Social media involves posting precious pictures and events, especially when you think about it like back in the 1980s. My mom took pictures of me when I was born, then printed a couple hundred copies. She went around putting them up at bus stops and leaving them on the counter in the chip shop for everyone to do as they pleased with them. Story 9. Customer service employees are often not allowed to sit down. Every company does this for some reason. I understand standing up to help customers, but if the store is empty and I have completed all my tasks, I am going to sit down. I do not want to stand for more than 8 hours. Thank you. Story 10. The act of sleeping. Forcing yourself to go unconscious and have psychedelic visions for more than 7 hours every single night is insane. Story 11. How many of the first world countries still do not have a safety net for healthcare for their citizens? The lack of compassion from both politicians and a large majority of the public who call themselves Christians is truly appalling. Story 12. In my state of Nebraska, you are not a legal adult until you are 19. This means that for a year you can serve in the military and potentially kill people and die, but you cannot own the bank account into which your paycheck is deposited. Story 13. Paying for school. I live in Denmark where education is free for the most part, with a few exceptions. I cannot fathom how America can justify people paying to go to school and receive higher-level education. What about those who are smart enough but cannot pay? Knowledge is a privilege in this system. Story 14. The expectation for women to spend hours a week removing every single hair from their bodies that does not grow from their scalp, eyebrows, or eyelids is unrealistic. Even if all the effort is made, and even if someone can tell that you had to remove the hair in the first place, such as dark spots where the hair under the skin can be seen, ingrown hairs, or the slight stubble that can often be felt mere hours after shaving, you are considered disgusting and repulsive. This is justified as being somehow unhygienic, despite it being perfectly hygienic for a man to have 5 to 10 times as much hair in the same places. Yes, many people do not care, but it is still the socially expected standard. Story 15. The United States' assumption that intestinal parasites are not a concern here is incorrect. Mexico advises its citizens to deworm twice a year. A National Institutes of Health study found that 53% of immigrants to the United States from Central America had some form of intestinal parasite. Many Asian countries recommend their citizens deworm at least once a year. Americans travel to developing countries frequently. Immigrants from those countries often return home to visit. New immigrants to the United States frequently work in restaurant kitchens, harvest crops, or handle livestock. Additionally, sushi is now more commonly consumed in the United States. It is unreasonable to assume our food is always completely free of contamination. With reductions in United States Department of Agriculture inspections, this concern is even greater. I had a gastrointestinal problem for 4 years. I saw a gastroenterologist who performed 2 endoscopies and a colonoscopy without identifying the cause. It did not occur to her that I might have an intestinal parasite. After 1 dose of Pyrantel-Pamoate, my problem was resolved, ending 4 years of suffering. Veterinarians recognize this as an ongoing issue and treat our pets accordingly. Americans are not immune, and we need to address this public health problem as well. This is not about blaming immigrants. It is a matter of public health that needs acknowledgement. Story 16. Waking up to an alarm every day just to sit in traffic and work more than 8 hours for most of your life sounds kind of dystopian when you stop and think about it. Story 17. If by universal you mean in my country, United States, then I would say tipping, drinking age versus go to war and kill someone age, the Electoral College, and left turn on green arrow only when left turn yield on green works perfectly fine. Story 18. In a civilization capable of manufacturing an abundance of everything required for both life and comfort, we have to work ourselves to death to afford even basic necessities. The wealthiest 10% of Americans could end poverty in America and intentionally choose not to. Story 19. Absolutely everything. Really thinking about it means that I am able to exert some control over parts of the electric tissue that governs my actions, making specific parts of the mass of fat and sodium change in voltage. Pores in my neurons have opened in such a way that I can manually open other pores in different neurons. And that is just the most basic thing. I think, therefore I am, is the foundational statement on which our entire model of reality is built, but it is already an almost impossibly complex phenomenon. Everything else is just progressively more complicated from there. I suppose if you want a specific answer, it is how most people spend the vast majority of their time functioning without thinking about that. Story 20. Spending more than 8 hours a day, multiple days a week, sitting in an office when there is literally nothing about your job that cannot be done remotely costs people a lot of time, money, and stress. I think it is a major contributor to declining birth rates. We all know there is a better, more human way to live. Story 21. Religion. There are between 1 and 200 supernatural entities in the sky judging you and controlling events. Trust me. Follow these traditions and give me your money. Story 22. Religion involves gathering at large stone buildings with candles everywhere. A man reads from a book he claims is the word of God, and everyone chants. A bloodied man is depicted nailed to a cross. It is essentially a cult that became widely accepted and normalized. Story 23. How many different scents do people use in a day? You hop in the shower first thing in the morning and wash your face with a scented wash. Then you wash your hair with a scented shampoo and follow it up with a scented conditioner. Next, you use a scented body wash or bar soap. After you get out, you apply scented lotion and scented deodorant. You may add scented hair products and scented makeup, then put on clothes that were washed in scented cleaner and dried with a scented drying cloth. After that, you spritz yourself with your favorite scent. It is too much. Story 24. Consciousness. We have feelings and make decisions, some of which we are not aware automatically until we sit and think about them. We can even think about consciousness. We are consciously aware of the fact that we have consciousness. It is almost as if our own mind is observing itself, but we can turn this off sometimes and just go about our business on autopilot. Story 25. Many people go into debt very casually in the United States. It is surprising how normalized that has become. Story 26. Waking up early in the morning and then fighting traffic just to get to a place where you spend the next 8 to 12 hours essentially making money for someone else. Story 27. Being appalled by other countries eating animals that we do not eat, but not caring about the ones we do eat. Story 28. There is a fruit that grows on a very small portion of the planet's surface. When it is ripe, we pick it, remove the seeds, and discard the fruit. We then dry the seeds in the sun for a few weeks. Once completely dry, we package them and send them halfway across the world. This is where it becomes interesting. Someone takes those seeds and roasts them over a very hot fire until they are charred. After that, the seeds are ground very finely, and hot water is poured over the grounds. We then drink the resulting liquid. The global industry supporting this process generates more economic activity than 3/4 of the countries produce individually. Story 29. Sleeping. Excuse me while I lose consciousness for the next 8 hours. I am almost certainly going to hallucinate during that time, but I may or may not remember it. Also, I do not have any idea why I do this each day. Story 30. Christmas trees. Just say the phrase to yourself 5 times and you will realize what a strange concept it is. Story 31. Paying for healthcare and insurance, then still having to pay more when something happens is frustrating. Money is deducted from my paycheck every month for health insurance, but if I were in a severe accident and needed extensive care in the hospital for a long time, I would still have to cover most of the costs. What is the purpose of insurance anyway? Story 32. Most of the technology we use in everyday life consists of convenient materials formed into practical shapes. A chair is wood-shaped for sitting. Cutlery is metal formed for eating food. A window is glass-shaped to block air, insects, and birds while letting light through. Computers, on the other hand, are essentially rocks carved into intricate microscopic circuits connected so that when electricity flows through them, they perform calculations extremely fast. There is nothing else we use that functions quite like that. Story 33. Blowing out candles on a birthday cake and then serving the cake that you just sprayed with water to your friends and family. No, thank you. I'll pick up some non-saliva cake on the way home. Story 34. The way recruitment is done by the United States military is predatory, especially in marginalized communities. Story 35. I am saying this as someone who is almost ready for the workforce and has begun to seriously dread this realization. We work 40 hours a week, and most have to organize our lives around it. The idea of working so much that we barely see our families or take time for ourselves is exhausting. It is to the point that there is a word for the fatigue many people feel because of it. It is crazy. We work to support our families but sacrifice time with them to do so. Story 36. That men are often expected to be the ones to pay and to ask out. I am a woman and do not mind paying. It is just the double standard that someone can expect another person to pay for everything but never the other way around. Also, weddings, the woman is given away. I would love to be wed one day, but it is odd if you think about it. Then the woman takes the man's name. I have heard of women keeping their own name or the pair mixing their surnames, but never the man taking the woman's name. Thank you for listening to my talk. Story 37. Earrings. You are literally punching holes in your body to put metal in. Think of it like this. If you are a person from the European diaspora, sometimes you see photos of people in Africa who stretch their bottom lip out to carry a bowl in it or elongate their necks with those spring-like rings. If you had been born and raised in a culture where nobody had any kind of piercings, the first time you learned about earrings, they would seem just as strange to you. Story 38. I don't know if this fits, but you would think by now they would have come up with a better way of doing dental x-rays instead of putting that uncomfortable universal sensor holder in your mouth. They have been doing this for years, and I hate it. Story 39. Marrying someone during the first 5 years of being together. Meeting someone and having them move in less than a year. Story 40. Eating involves putting substances into our bodies, which are then processed, and the waste is excreted. While it is essential for survival, it is an unusual concept to consider. Story 41. The assumption that 18-year-olds are mature enough to understand the ramifications of military enlistment and student loans is not just an American issue. Story 42. Putting your tooth under your pillow is like sleeping on your bones in hopes of it turning into money. Imagine explaining that to someone who has never heard of that custom before. Story 43. Filling the dead with poisonous preservatives, sealing them in a very fancy, expensive box to prevent decay, and then burying them with large, fancy, expensive imported stones, expecting others to visit on special occasions. Story 44. That being worth billions on paper means you have many liquid assets. As seen in margin call, something is only worth what someone else is willing to pay for it. So if you sell a large amount of something on the market at once, its value falls dramatically. Story 45. Relying on products made of plastic and cement while the entire planet is burning out of control, knowing that we are dooming the entire planet but not stopping it because it would be less comfortable. Story 46. The typical American diet includes a lot of fast food, fad diets, and processed foods. It is actually surprising. I am from the United States, by the way. Story 47. The idea that every transaction involving money or resources should be taxed, with most of it skimmed off the top before we see it. Story 48. Obsessing about macronutrients and stomach fat is unnecessary unless you are preparing for a competition or engaged in serious training. It also matters if you are medically underweight, overweight, or have health-related reasons to monitor your intake. There are more worthwhile pursuits beyond physical appearance. Bodies change in many ways throughout life. Using diet and exercise to achieve goals like strength and agility is excellent, and I do not criticize that. Setting goals such as climbing more difficult routes or running faster is commendable. My concern is the obsession with aesthetics, especially in social media influencer circles, where girls compare themselves, feel dissatisfied with a strong body, take pride in skipping meals all day, or appear unhappy when at a heavier weight. Story 49. 5-day workweek and 2-day weekends. Why is my time off the same as everyone else's so banks, dentists, and other services are closed? Why don't we stagger days off so businesses and professional services are available 7 days a week? But not everyone has the same days off. Story 50. Having sexual intercourse or kissing someone while intoxicated with a stranger just because you found them attractive or that person appeared persuasive is unwise. Story 51. Most of our transportation methods rely on a complex system to work, such as a car. A piece of metal creates a spark of electricity that jumpstarts the engine. During use, we rely on liquid fossil fuels to keep the engine running, sometimes reaching speeds over 100 miles per hour depending on the vehicle. What kind of makeshift Frankenstein system is this? Story 52. Religion. How you trust anyone or anything promoting a 2,000-year-old imaginary figure as a reason to live your life better is beyond me. But those human blood-sucking temples are in every town. I guess there are just a lot of lost people out there. Story 53. Bringing other sentient beings into the world and abducting their children to drink their mother's milk. Story 54. You can be assaulted and raped in prison, and you can find drugs. I mean, in the Middle Ages, I can understand, but nowadays, with the current availability of closed-circuit television, prisons should be the safest places to be. Story 55. I feel like the United States is no different from the Middle Ages, aside from better living conditions. We are slaves to capitalism, like kings and queens, with the illusion of choice and set up to fail. Story 56. Most students I teach admit to spending between 6 and 7 hours a day staring at their phones, often until the early hours of the morning, but never have time to do their homework. Story 57. Touching or petting dogs or children that do not belong to you or are strangers, or touching someone's pregnant belly. Story 58. Driving to work and spending all day there can be unpleasant and uncomfortable. It often dominates our lives. Story 59. We have a choice between profits for psychopaths and surviving as a species, and we seem to be choosing profits for psychopaths. Story 60. The whole debate about immigration. Why is it acceptable for someone to move from Mississippi to California without questions, but if people from Mexico move to California, the National Guard is sent in? Story 61. Children are legally required to attend school from the ages of 5 to 18, but must also pay for lunch. If a child does not have money to pay for food, they have to starve. I was not one of those children, but I was friends with many of them. Our school system is appalling and embarrassing. Story 62. Drinking alcohol is normal and often encouraged, but cannabis is demonized. Alcohol is much more dangerous, harmful to your health, and physically addictive than cannabis. Alcohol prematurely ends many lives and ruins even more. Does cannabis need to be regulated and enjoyed responsibly? Absolutely. But treating it and passing legislation as if it were hard drugs and worse than alcohol is absurd and harmful. Story 63. The Ultimate Fighting Championship and boxing involve watching men fight each other for entertainment. It is surprising that people participate in these sports and that society accepts this as a form of amusement. This can be seen as a modern version of ancient gladiator games, which we now consider barbaric, yet we do not view our own actions in the same way. I am not judging those who enjoy these sports, as I listen to Joe Rogan daily. However, the concept continues to baffle me. Story 64. Marriage means saying, I love you so much that I want the government to recognize our relationship. Story 65. For likes and clicks, people post videos on social media of their family and friends involving intimate or private matters without obtaining their consent. Story 66. Legalized or formalized marriage. You should not need a court to acknowledge or dissolve your relationship with someone. Story 67. Young children and swimming pools. One seizure, one impulsive stranger, or one moment of distraction can literally cause death. Takes less than 2 minutes for it to become the biggest tragedy of your life. Story 68. We are all using electronics, such as our phones, which have much greed and blood behind them. From the minerals mined in the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the slave-like living conditions in China. We have free trade agreements with countries that violate international human rights law. We keep striving for more, better, and more efficient lives instead of nurturing a standard that allows us to be happy and focusing on solving world hunger and helping the places that need it most. It is insanity that we all feel okay with this while being unable to do anything against it. It is insane how little practical life knowledge is taught in schools. It is also insane that Europe still lives with the mental scars of what World War II brought, while at the same time embracing every culture the world has to offer, even as many countries have just emerged from the Soviet era. It is madness how much we think we should have, considering the pain and trauma our parents and grandparents endured, all within a system the world has never seen before and that keeps evolving faster and faster. Story 69. Dating applications. Have we really just handed over the most important decision in our lives to one or two private companies to monetize? Story 70. Dogs that live outside all day and night in cities are like annoying, unsocialized yard ornaments that could be dangerous. We have cameras now, so you do not need a dog that lives only in the yard or a pen. If they are a family member, then treat them like one. Story 71. Not really universal, but American tipping culture. To anyone outside of America, including myself, it is just strange. Story 72. We use most of our energy and time to work for the bare basics so we stay alive. Story 73. The amount of sugar we consume and, what is worse, how normal it is for children apart from ultra-processed foods. Story 74. The idea that your house should increase in value without you doing anything beyond basic maintenance or tutorial-level renovations. Everything else depreciates, yet even trailers do not. Story 75. The fact that we have to pay for essentials like drinking water, shelter, basic clothing to cover ourselves, and heavier clothing to keep warm during the winter months is concerning. Story 76. Life insurance, especially for children, is extremely predatory. You are essentially gambling that your child will be among the very small percentage of children who will pass away. If that happens, the payout is typically very small and will likely leave you bankrupt due to medical bills. Story 77. Being born in a developed country with access to food, water, and shelter is something to be very grateful for. Many people do not have these basic necessities. Story 78. People often use the idea of something not being natural as a point in discussions. Usually, they mean that something does not appear in nature. However, in my view, there is no single thing we do that fits the strict definition of natural. Wearing clothes, using public transportation, the food we eat, how we drink, how we use the bathroom. I'm struggling to find one thing in our behavior that is truly natural, yet this term is used repeatedly. Story 79. Homework. They spend 6 hours at school and are expected to spend another 2 hours on schoolwork. Let children be children. Let them relax at home. Story 80. When you walk into clothing stores, 50% is dedicated to women, 45% to children, and 5% to men. Seriously, clothing designers and shops give women pockets and give men options. Story 81. Scraping your face with sharpened steel every day in the obsessive pursuit of removing your natural hair growth. Story 82. The way people these days throw out perfectly working things in favor of newer items that do the exact same job is surprising. Some people discard things that are only slightly broken, even though they could easily fix them themselves quickly and cheaply. We have the internet with millions of guides on how to repair almost anything you can imagine, including the most niche gadgets and products. We should be much more resourceful and capable than previous generations, but we are not. If anything, we seem to be getting less skilled. I knew a couple who were going to throw out a perfectly fine 400-pound Dyson vacuum because the battery did not hold as much charge as it used to. It never occurred to them that they could simply replace the battery. The device was designed to be user replaceable. Story 83. Everything is free, but we have to pay taxes and we are drowning in debt, even though we create money. We are fooling ourselves. Story 84. Just driving home 45 minutes or more after working night shifts, sometimes 90 minutes or more for some people. No one offers to pick them up if possible. Hotels do not offer deals for these workers, and many accidents occur because these workers are too tired to drive safely and may veer into oncoming traffic or off the road. Story 85. Code switching, at least to the extent we do it, is important because something that is completely normal in one culture can be considered psychopathic law-breaking behavior in another. Cultures around the world are so different that people are expected to almost become different people when interacting with other cultures. I do not think all cultures should be exactly the same, but the fact that so many of them are so different is quite remarkable. Story 86. The stock market assumes that every company must grow infinitely to remain valuable. But why does my grocery store need to be constantly innovating? For example, they fired the cashiers, and now I have to scan and bag everything myself. Great. So cutting edge, thank you. Story 87. Color coding babies to identify their genitals. Designing an entire personality, complete with future purpose, careers, life goals, and social identity based on the shape of a baby's genitals. Defining what is and is not acceptable for a baby based on societal expectations related to the shape of their genitals. Story 88. Gas oven ranges. Many people have them without functional hoods to ventilate the air. Research clearly shows that this causes self-poisoning. Story 89. Calling a significant other baby or babe is very common. At the same time, why do we call people we have romantic feelings for a baby? Story 90. When you are in public and look up, you realize everyone around you is looking down at their phone. Everyone has one. It is like an extension of their person now. If you are around a lot of people and stop to look around to notice this, it is pretty insane. Story 91. Circumcision of newborns. We are essentially saying that we could do better than God or millions of years of evolution. Story 92. Drink milk? Like from a breast? You weird. Oh, okay. But what if it was from a cow's udder? Story 93. People who are not morning people insist that a chemical dependency is necessary to be functional in the mornings. They also look down on others who do not like bitter coffee. Story 94. All our everyday technology depends on other countries' infrastructures. If Microsoft decides to shut down every personal computer in the world, it just can. The same applies to Google, Apple, and others. We put so much trust in third parties. Story 95. You can go to the hospital, the doctors can say, you need this treatment, you get the treatment, then the insurance can say, no, we do not think you really needed that, we will not pay. Insane. Obviously, I am in the United States. I know it is not like this everywhere. Story 96. Supporting a secular Middle Eastern country's military crackdown because they are an ethnostate justified by religion. Story 97. Having a dog in the city. If your neighbor went outside your block 3 times a day to defecate on the lawn and urinate on almost everything around, you would not be happy about that. Story 98. We keep raising the minimum wage. Don't get me wrong, I completely believe people need and deserve to be paid a living wage, but it is never enough. Some people want more. People cannot pay the rent, so we raise the wage. Now people can pay rent and might even have some extra spending money. However, someone else is not making as much as they used to, so prices go up. But then people cannot pay the rent. It just goes around and around. Story 99. Taxes on income that has already been taxed. Edit. I guess it should be clarified that being against taxation and being against overtaxation are two completely different things, and that seems to be lost on some people. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.